you might go slightly hypoglycemic during the night, which you probably won't notice because glucagon levels will come up, thus enhancing the growth hormone pulse, which occurs at night. Now, before you ask, I already know that this question is going to come up. Steve, can I combine all of these amino acids, melatonin, GABA, and berberine and sitagliptin, aka Januvia, all before bed to prevent the breakdown of the nighttime growth hormone releasing hormone pulse, stimulating the maximum amount of growth hormone release and downstream preventing the breakdown of IGF-1, again, by this combination of berberine and Januvia being DPP-4Is? And yes, you can. I've done this already, and my growth hormone secretion and IGF-1 levels upon waking actually quite high, to the point my growth hormone levels were still elevated in the morning. I'm talking about 10 to 12 nanograms per milliliter, with an IGF-1 creeping towards the top of the reference range, around 300 nanograms per milliliter as well, right? Is it as potent as using growth hormone exogenously or growth hormone secretagogues? Well, when you're not allowed to use those, then this is certainly the next best thing. So that's 500 milligrams berberine and 50 milligrams, maybe even 100 milligrams sitagliptin Januvia, alongside all of these amino acids, melatonin and GABA before bed, getting you the highest growth hormone levels and the highest IGF-1 levels upon waking. You might go slightly hypoglycemic during the night, which you probably won't notice because glucagon levels will come up, thus enhancing the growth hormone pulse, which occurs at night. Still, if you're a little bit worried, make sure you wear a continuous blood glucose monitor during the night, like a Dexcom 7, for example, to see if you have tremendous dips in your blood glucose levels, and then suddenly it shoots up because glucagon is being released, right? Adequate tracking of your health parameters are always advised when stacking all of these kind of medications and over-the-counter supplements together. Keep in mind that dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors not only prevent the breakdown of erythropoietin and growth hormone releasing hormone, but also several other growth factors which are on the screen, including angiopoietin, epidermal growth factor, erythropoietin, like I mentioned before, fibroblast growth factor 1 to 23, glial cell line-derived neurotropic factor, as well as brain-derived neurotropic factor, so you can also prevent the breakdown of cerebral lysin or similar products that have some sort of neurotropic benefits. Growth hormone releasing hormone, like I mentioned before, hepatocyte growth factor is good for liver health, insulin-like growth factor 1 and 2, mechano growth factor, myostatin, GDF8. So unfortunately, by taking berberine or other DPP-4Is, you also prevent the breakdown of myostatin. So all the more reason to increase follistatin levels later on at night through several pathways, which we're going to get into. Again, brain-derived neurotropic factor, nerve growth factor, thrombopoietin, vascular endothelial growth factor, and many, many, many more. So please do additional research. None of the side effects of dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors include substantially elevated growth hormone levels to the point you get acromegaly, or substantially elevated erythropoietin to the point you get elevated hematocrit and red blood cell count to the point you need to start doing frequent blood donations. So again, we're just optimizing all of the pathways here to elicit an additional anabolic response on top of the over-the-counter supplements and just sleeping according to your circadian rhythm and using metabolic modulators, which are not specifically listed, which we'll get into. But again, your mileage might vary. If you incorporate a dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor intelligently, you're literally optimizing all of these growth factors that you're producing naturally. And overall, you should have a performance-enhancing effect. All right, that was a complete mouthful. So let's move over to S3, the beta-2 adrenergic receptor agonists. And there's a boatload of options listed here, none of which we generally use in the fitness or bodybuilding community. Maybe if you compete in drug-tested sports, you're trying to circumnavigate the broad list of beta-2 adrenergic receptor agonists, and that's why they all included it here. Maybe the only one that we're actually using is salbutamol, albuterol, which is that they have a small exemption, up to 1600 micrograms over a 24-hour period. Don't worry, we'll get to that. But clenbuterol, the one that we actually use and is very popular in the fitness space, is actually listed under S1.2, the other anabolic agents, because clenbuterol actually has some anabolic effects from 40 micrograms per day onwards. And weirdly enough, salbutamol, albuterol also has some anabolic properties from 4 milligrams per day onwards, but that's listed here. Now, that means that the exemption dose of 1600 micrograms per day is about well, let's say 2.5 times lower than the anabolic dose of salbutamol being 4 milligrams per day. However, if you want to stay WADA compliant, you're not allowed to use over 1600 micrograms salbutamol albuterol spaced out over a 24-hour period with a maximum serving of 800 micrograms per time, which I guess is the absolute cutoff between the non-performance enhancing bronchodilation dose for people suffering from asthma and the minute anabolic effect that might help you perform slightly better in endurance sports or strength-based events, right? 600 micrograms versus 4 milligrams. Yeah, your mileage might vary if you limit yourself to only 600 micrograms. So that brings us to the Half-Natty approved beta-2 adrenergic receptor agonists that we can use. Again, salbutamol, a maximum of 600 micrograms over 24 hours. Formoterol, a maximum of 54 micrograms over 24 hours. Salmeterol, a maximum of 200 micrograms over 24 hours. Vilanterol, a maximum of only 25 micrograms over 24 hours. And keep in mind that vilanterol is often combined with flutacosone and umeclidinium. And a beta-2 adrenergic receptor agonists, which are not listed on the WADA prohibited list of 2025. Yes, I already did the research, so you don't have to, even though I don't know the effective dosages because I haven't tried these particular compounds myself, so I don't know how they compare to salbutamol or clenbuterol for that matter. There's lev, albuterol, pyrbuterol, and metaproterenol. And this is like my 20th take because it's completely impossible to pronounce. So let's move over to the beta-3 adrenergic receptor agonists, because let's be honest here, beta-2 adrenergic receptor agonists are kind of old news. They stimulate your heart rate. They're very annoying to use, and certainly clenbuterol causes tremendous cramping unless you really manage your electrolyte and your taurine intake. I already made an extensive deep dive about mirabegron, also known as myrbetriq or betmiga, which is a far superior fat burner compared to clenbuterol because it doesn't stimulate your heart rate like crazy and doesn't cause you cramps like crazy like clenbuterol does. So I already made a deep dive. I would highly suggest you give that one a watch. So here are the Half-Natty approved beta-3 adrenergic receptor agonists, mirabegron, vibegron, and then the following are still undergoing clinical investigation: solabegron, BRL37344, L316243, and L796568. Right? I'm not sure if those are available. I haven't seen them on the market anywhere, but mirabegron and vibegron are available in several pharmacies in certain parts of the world. And I was finally able to find a source for mirabegron. You can find that on my Ctrl+F source list. You're welcome in case you want to give that compound a try. And while we're on the topic of fat burners, have a look into yohimbine or ribosine, which are both alpha-2 adrenergic receptor antagonists, really promoting fat loss from the lower body, especially the lower back. And you can combine yohimbine or ribosine with something like mirabegron, still stay WADA compliant because yohimbine, ribosine, and mirabegron are not included in the WADA prohibited list of 2025, and thus you're still Half-Natty approved. So the Half-Natty approved alpha-2 adrenergic receptor antagonists are yohimbine, ribosine, and corinunthin, which you usually find in yohimbine formulas. Again, these are all stereoisomers of each other, so the chemical structure, the molecule looks exactly the same, but it might be folded slightly differently. It seems that ribosine gives most people the least amount of side effects. But we'll discuss these alpha-2 adrenergic receptor antagonists a little bit more in depth when we get to the fat-burning aids discussed under S6 stimulants.